Week 4 is upon us. There are a lot of first-time meetings between a number of these schools and the matchups. And, of course, we are in late September, but we may talk about some games that might be must-win games already. I know, even with the expanded playoff schedule in the NAI, we may be at that point. Hi, I'm Joey McWilliams. Thanks for watching Midwest Sports Net. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Let's go ahead and put on the bottom of the screen there the NAI F-ball poll following week 3. And this is a look at a media poll, folks from all around the country that are a part of this. So let's go ahead and get right on in to our matchups. We're going to preview week 4, so let's do so right now. Georgetown, Reinhardt taking on each other for the 5th time. Reinhardt with the 4-0 lead in the series all time. The last time they played was 5 years ago. 45-21, Reinhardt with the win in that one. Coming off a loss to Cumberland's this past week, 20-19, just a 1-point loss for the Eagles. Georgetown, though, continuing to roll. 2-0 on the season. Coach Oliver's Tigers defeated Pikeville 35-14 last week. This is going to be one of those games that we talk about at the end when we do a little prediction time and we see what the trends say over the course of years and this season as well. And we'll be able to pick that game then. We'll get to that at the end. Let's move on down. Warner taking on Kentucky Christian this weekend. Kentucky Christian doesn't have a win yet, but they do have points on the board. The Knights scored 6 last week to Cumberland. 50-6 was the loss there. Warner 2-0 on the year, a victory over Fort Lauderdale. It's nice to see the Eagles back on the field this week. Warner with a 46-13 victory in that one. 2-0 on the season, trying to make it 3-0 against a team in Kentucky Christian that's just had a rough year, to say the least. The main thing, I think, for the Knights, continue to put points on the board. You can't win if you don't have points on the board, so try to put some points on the board in that one. Moving on along, Roosevelt at Indiana Wesleyan. Let's get that up there. Roosevelt at Indiana Wesleyan. And this is a first ever meeting, maybe a last ever meeting for that matter. Roosevelt in its final season, trekking through the NAIA in its first year of transition into Division II play in all sports. Of course, that means football as well. Roosevelt with a victory last week, 42-7 over the Crusaders. Madonna still one for all time, and even that was a forfeit. Crusaders are going to pick up a win sometime soon, but we're talking about Roosevelt right now. Tough place to get a win, and that is at Indiana Wesleyan, as the Wildcats get another victory at the end, sealing the win by holding off a 2-point conversion in the closing minutes of the game. We'll have this prediction on this at the end of this live stream as well. Indiana Wesleyan, 12 consecutive regular season wins, 3-0 on the year so far. Here's a big matchup now as we move on along. St. Thomas taking on Texas Wesleyan. St. Thomas 1-2 on the year, Texas Wesleyan 3-0 on the year. And I don't know that I'm necessarily a big fan of saying that something is a must-win game in September, but we could be at that point for St. Thomas. Not both of these teams, for St. Thomas. The Bobcats are 1-2 on the year. A couple of tough losses against tough programs. But this is also a program, Coach Reichel has scheduled a challenging schedule, knowing that his team 9-2 in 2022, 9-2 in 2021, and still didn't make the playoffs, trying to make some kind of statement here in the early season before they get into that Sun Conference schedule, which is going to be tough enough as it is. One more loss on the schedule puts St. Thomas in a really tough situation because there's not much margin for error really at that point in time. Can't get in. With 3 losses, it would be challenging. And the folks in the committee who will look at the official NAIA rankings, not ratings, at the end of the season, and they'll look to see where St. Thomas is. And St. Thomas with 3 losses, if they were to pick up a loss here this weekend, maybe more, it's going to be challenging to get in with that at-large bid, even with 4 additional playoff spots for 2023. Now, you can still win your way in by winning the Sun Conference, but you also have to contend with the defending national runners-up in Kaiser, a team that is finding its footing every single week. A very difficult Southeastern team as well, made it into our rankings here in the NAIA F-ball rankings it's going to be tough. So you would have to win the conference outright. And I don't know that that's something that the Bobcats can do if you continue to get a slide there. Now, I realize all these teams can make runs later on, but this is a tough contest and one that St. Thomas needs to win. Second ever trip west of the Mississippi. They're going to be going to Fort Worth to Crowley ISD. Fantastic facility there. We were there for Midwest Sports Saturday about 3 weeks ago. Texas Wesleyan, on the other hand, really on a roll right now. Moving on through, getting the victory over OUAZ early, so having the inside track in the Sooner Athletic Conference to try to get a title outright and make its way into the playoffs for the first time as well. St. Thomas lost to Carroll last week, or 2 weeks ago, 26-23. Texas Wesleyan defeated Panhandle State 31-16 last week. This could be a matchup with two very, very solid running backs. Rontavious Farmer, who is rushing at a pace of 137.7 yards per game. That's good enough for second in the NAIA, has 7 rushing touchdowns. How about Ernie Caesar for the Rams? 119.3 rushing yards per game, has 4 rushing touchdowns. And these two teams, by the way, are really, really good when they are forced to pick up fourth down. 2 of 10 teams in the NAIA that are 100% in picking up fourth down. St. Thomas has the better record there, 5 of 5 when going forward on fourth. 100% of the time. Texas Wesleyan, 3 of 3 on fourth down as well. This could be a game in which you might see the clock run quite a bit because of these two strong running backs in Farmer and Caesar. Again, maybe a must-win situation for St. Thomas. We'll find that out. Let's move on along. OUAZ at SAGU. Ottawa from Arizona taking on Southwestern Assemblies of God. This is the 5th time these two teams have met. The Lions won the first one. OUAZ has won the next 4, including 39-12 in 2022. OUAZ defeated Texas College last weekend. SAGU defeated Arkansas Baptist last weekend. Moving on along as we look at St. Francis, still undefeated on the season. The Fighting Saints, or the Fighting Tumulties, as the case may be. No Sam Tumulty at the helm last week, still able to pick up a 14-12 victory over Lawrence Tech. Taylor 1-3, taking on back-to-back Division I opponents over the last couple of weekends. I'm sure it's going to be nice for them, not only being at home, but taking on an NAIA program as well. Tough draw, though, with St. Francis. That's going to be a challenge coming in to take on the Trojans. John Melvin on the road to take on Florida Memorial. Florida Memorial, after a victory in week 1, a couple of losses since then, including a big loss at the hands of Grambling State. Now, if you're following Florida Memorial, by the way, and trying to keep up with some of the stats, they don't have all of their stats in to the Presto site for the NAIA. And so you look at some of those numbers, they may seem just a little bit skewed. That's because there's only 1 week listed up there. It's just something to keep in mind. Florida Memorial lost to Grambling State 58-22 last week. They're going to host John Melvin. And John Melvin 0-1 in the season, this inaugural campaign, trying to get things going there in Louisiana, on the road in Florida this week. Peru State taking on Missouri Baptist. Well, someone has to win this one, definitely. And Missouri Baptist hasn't been able to pick up that elusive victory since joining the Heart of America Conference. Are they going to be able to do it at home against Peru State? Now, here's just an early take on this. We won't put this one in the trends. Both of these two teams have been trending downward. Peru State, so close to picking up that elusive first win a little bit earlier. Atchison, Kansas was not going to be the place last week to do that. We said that. Benedictine on the ropes, picks up win number 2 of the season. However, St. Louis may just be that place. And if we were to pick this game, we're going to go ahead and go with Peru State in this one. I think that MoBap is going to remain with the O in the win column for at least another week. Bobcats pick up the win right here. Speaking of an O in the win column, the Crusaders have had that for quite a while, and it's going to be tough on the road at St. Xavier this week. First ever meeting between these two programs. Madonna lost to Roosevelt. St. Xavier lost against Indiana Wesleyan. That 2-point conversion at the end. Once again, Cougars just couldn't quite pick it up. Lawrence Tech 1-2 all time, or 1-2 this season. Olivet Nazarene 1-2. Second meeting is Olivet won 49-31 back in 2019. Both teams coming off of losses last week. Clark is a team, though, that's coming off a win. Defeated Central Methodist 27-24. The Pride pick up the first win of the season. And now they take to the road to Olathe, Kansas, where they are going to be taking on Mid-America Nazarene. A tough draw right there. Mid-America Nazarene defeated William Penn 29-20 last week. And Adrian Parsons continues to just climb the record books for the Pioneers and put on a show. Other than that, 294.3 yards per game. That's good enough for fourth in the NAIA. Expect a lot of passing yards in this one. Stay in the heart. Let's go with a couple of teams that are undefeated right now. Grandview, 3-0 on the year. Missouri Valley, 3-0 on the year. Grandview defeated Baker, in fact, blanked the Wildcats last weekend, 24-0. Missouri Valley with a big victory. A lot of points scored in this one, 49-42 over Graceland last week. Grandview, though, really strong when they get in the red zone. 10 of 11 scores once they get in the red zone, 91%, 8 touchdowns, 2 field goals. Missouri Valley's even better. They are 14 for 14 inside the red zone this year, 100%. And of that, 12 of those 14 scores have been touchdowns. Missouri Valley able to put points on the board. They did it in a big way last week. They're doing it also on the ground as well. Jeremiah Bryant, 128.7 yards per game rushing, 5th in the NAIA, 7 rushing touchdowns as well. That's good enough for 4th in the NAIA. These two teams on a collision course, crossover matchup here. One of them is going to stay with that 0 in the loss column. Which one's it going to be? Home team here is Missouri Valley. We may talk about this one just a little bit later on. St. Francis of Indiana hasn't gotten a win just yet. St. Ambrose, the Bees, are winless as well. This is a matchup that's gone to St. Francis over the years, 11-2 all-time, and won 5 straight, including 31-13. Their last meeting was in 2019. St. Francis has lost 2 games each by 17 points apiece this year, trying to pick up a win on the road. We move over to the GPAC. We have some news about the GPAC. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Midland coming off a loss last week, a 1-point loss at the hands of Dakota Wesleyan, went no longer undefeated on the season. And now the Warriors have to go on the road to Morningside. 25th meeting between these two programs. Morningside 22-2 all time. Won last year 47-12. Morningside has Zach Norton, who's been picking up 121.7 yards per game, receiving yards. That's 4th in the NAI. A couple of receiving touchdowns, got both of them last week. Morningside, by the way, is also a team that just moves the ball consistently. 25.3 first down per game. That's 9th in the NAI. But the big deal here is that Morningside, they're just picking it up and picking it up and picking it up, and they haven't been able to backdoor some of those first downs, getting them by way of penalty. Only 1 first down picked up by way of penalty this season, and they're, again, doing it at a clip of more than 25 a game. Morningside also, here's the big number, Morningside, 70 consecutive wins on the season. Well, no. You have to go back to 2016. 70 consecutive wins. That would be a really good season. In total, in the regular season, 70 consecutive regular season wins. I'm going to get this out. Let me try it one last time. 70 consecutive regular season wins. There we go. Now you've got to factor in some national championships along the way. And there we go. And Dale mentions could be a wet one if the forecast is there. So Sioux City might be able to host this one. Folks get wet, and I think that's going to be the case, Dale, throughout the country, as where we are going to be and the matchup that we were going to be at. I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but we're definitely bringing our ponchos Hey, good evening, Jake. Thanks for watching tonight. Appreciate you stopping by tonight. Always a privilege to get to see you guys on. If there's anyone else wants to tell us from where you're watching tonight, I would appreciate that greatly. Morningside, 70 consecutive regular season wins, trying to make it 71 against Midland. We'll predict this game just a little bit later on. I mentioned that there was GPAC news on the way. Well, you know what? You're looking at a North Star matchup. That's exactly right. However, Waldorf has decided that it's going to go ahead and move on in 24-25. Not next season, but not this season, but the season after this one. Waldorf will be moving to the GPAC, and that's a big move. It really is for Waldorf to do this, not just in football, obviously in all the programs. The North Star has been suffering because of programs that had to not only discontinue their athletic departments, but just discontinue entirely. We mentioned here on the channel, and we've been mentioning it pretty much since week 0, that it might be something of mention that the North Star might look west and see if there could be some place to go, because it's a conference that's down to just 5 football teams and 7 programs overall. Maybe look west, see if there might be some way to merge with the Frontier Conference or Cascade. Frontier, though, in football especially. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But in the meantime, Waldorf has already stated, and the GPAC has put out the release, Waldorf coming in 24-25. The Warriors are moving to the GPAC, and Waldorf, a team in Iowa. Honestly, you can't think of a better move and a better place to go if you want to stay close to home. So the Warriors are moving on. But in the meantime, they still have to finish out the North Star schedule, and they have a very challenging opponent this week as Dickinson State comes to town. Dickinson State 2-1 on the season, 3-1 overall. The Blue Hawks have won 9 of 10 meetings all time in this series, including a 50-7 win in 2022. Dickinson State defeated Wisconsin Stout 24-21 last week, a win over a D3 program, and has won 28 consecutive North Star games, a streak that began, by the way, with a win over Waldorf. So there you go. Waldorf had Jatovier Hill last week as one of our top 5 performers, 133.3 rushing yards per game for the season. That's good enough for 3rd in the NAIA, 8 rushing touchdowns as well. That's 2nd in the NAIA. He had 5 of them last week. So Dickinson State at Waldorf, and I believe we're going to talk about that one at the end as well. Culver Stockton, 1-3. Benedictine, 2-2 on the year. Benedictine picked up that 2nd win of the season against Peru State last week, 62-28, did it in style. Culver Stockton defeated Missouri Baptist to pick up its 1st win of the season, and it took overtime to get there, 33-30 for the Wildcats. This is one of those trends we'll talk about at the end, but check this one out. In 1973, by the way, when I was just a wee little Joey, 2 years old back in 1973, so that tells you just how old I am. That was the first matchup between Culver Stockton and Benedictine. And Culver Stockton won in 1973. And Culver Stockton won in 1974. But starting in 1975, Benedictine started winning and winning and winning and winning, including 33 consecutive wins coming into 2023. 45-16, Benedictine over Culver Stockton last year. 33 consecutive wins in this series. We'll talk about this one at the end when we talk about the trends. How about Siena Heights? 1-1 on the year. Judson 0-2 on the year. First ever meeting between these two programs. Siena Heights coming off the victory over St. Ambrose. Judson lost Concordia a couple of weeks ago. Back to the GPAC with Doane defeated as well. James defeated. I guess, do you say defeated? I don't know. It's not undefeated, that's for sure. Both teams 0-4 on the year. Someone has to win this one. Doane has won 3 of 4 meetings all time. Jamestown won the first time in this series, 41-17. That was last year. Both teams coming off of losses in the previous week. We move on along. Dakota Wesleyan got the big win over Midland last week, 33-32. Concordia lost to Dordt 38-7. Concordia owns a 13-10 advantage in this series, won 20-12 back in 2022. First ever meeting for Thomas and Bethel. Well, we're going to say that all year long for Thomas because they're in their first season in football. 0-1, Bethel 3-0. Bethel defeated Bluefield 61-14. And the Wildcats are scoring 63 points per game through 3 games so far. That is tops in the NAIA. Also, they are just unstoppable so far once they get into the red zone. 20 for 20. That's number 1 in the NAIA. 17 touchdowns, 3 field goals for Bethel once they get into the red zone. They make quite a run. By the way, thanks for watching from East Wichita, Kansas tonight, as we'll talk about a homecoming week for the Falcons here in just a moment. This one a big one. Hart crossover. Graceland 3-1. Baker 2-1. Baker has won 40 in this series. As a matter of fact, 40, 12, and 1 all time, and 14 straight victories for the Wildcats. That includes a 56-42 win last year. We're going to talk about that game last year as we talk a little bit about what these two teams bring to the table. Baker had Sam Hagerman at the helm last year in that victory, still there, but he's been replaced by Truman Julesgaard. A solid season for Julesgaard coming in through 3 games so far. Graceland, by the way, led by Cade Ross, 310 passing yards per game. That's second in the NAIA, has 18 passing touchdowns. That's tops in the NAIA. Gerald Monroe, 175.8 receiving yards per game. That is enough for tops in the NAIA. 38 receptions, tops in the NAIA. 11 receiving touchdowns, tops in the NAIA. So you have to talk about this offense for Graceland. But the issue here for the Yellow Jackets, it's not just the offense. This is also the most penalized team in the NAIA. Of 94 teams, been penalized 13.8 times per game. And you think, okay, well, they're putting up that kind of offense. Yeah, 42 points last week in the loss to Missouri Valley. But how much did they give up? 206 yards, penalty yards last week. You don't think something like that makes a difference in a 49-42 loss? Those were yards that the Yellow Jackets needed. So they need to clean things up as they go up against Baker this week, a team that's been solid, 2-1 on the year. Who's going to get the victory here? We'll talk about that a little bit later on as we talk about the trends later on. Thanks for everybody for watching tonight. Dave says go Mustangs tonight. Appreciate you watching, and let us know from where you all are watching tonight as we are live streaming. I mentioned, by the way, rain in the forecast this weekend throughout the country, especially in the Midwest. Speaking of the Midwest, let's move over to the KCAC. Avila, formerly of the Hart Conference in the KCAC for the last couple of years, got a share of the KCAC title last year, made a trip to the playoffs. 1-3 right now on the road, taking on McPherson, 3-1. Avila's 4-0 all-time in this series. That includes a 43-23 victory last year. Avila lost to Bethel last week. McPherson with a big win over Ottawa, and McPherson's led by Tristan Zabo, who is passing for 294 yards per game. That's good enough for 5th in the NAIA, 12 passing touchdowns as well. And he's throwing at 9.3 yards per attempt. So the Bulldogs are picking up pretty much a first down just about every time he throws the ball. Union on the road at Campbellsville. Both teams 1-2. Campbellsville 17-11 all time in this series. Won 42-14 in 2022. Campbellsville defeated Kentucky Christian, but then who hasn't this year? And Union lost to Cumberland's. Campbellsville, 370-plus yards passing per game, led by Jagger Gellis, who, by the way, is putting up 288.7 yards passing himself. That's 8th in the NAI, and he's thrown 9 touchdown passes as well. I talked about the Sun Conference, talked about Southeastern. Southeastern gets on the winning track last week with a victory over Reinhardt, 23-20. Faulkner still 0-2 on the year. Southeastern 4-3 all-time in this series. The last time these two teams played, it was 2 years ago, 31-14. The Fire pick up the victory in this one. Moving on along as we go to the mid-states. Lindsey Wilson taking on Bluefield. The Rams have moved out of the mid-states into the Appalachian Conference, so a non-conference matchup between two 2-1 teams. Lindsey Wilson, 5-0 all-time in this series, won 62-23 7 years ago. Lindsey Wilson defeated Point last week by 50, 57-7. Bluefield lost to Bethel. The Wildcats put up those 61 points to just 14. Bluefield, however, led by Nate Herstich. And I know we haven't really talked about him as much this year. He's only leading the NAIA in passing. Maybe we need to give him a little bit more time. Herstich, 321.7 passing yards per game. He's doing it at a clip of 64.9 percentage completion percentage there for Herstich. Bluefield, going to be a tough matchup at home for Lindsey Wilson, the Blue Raiders, traveling east. William Penn on the road at Central Methodist. Each team with one win. William Penn getting its win in the first week of the season. That 6-2 victory. Lost to Mid-America Nazarene last week, 29-20. Central Methodist lost to Clark 27-24. William Penn is led by Sterling Ramsey II. He's putting up 291 passing yards per game, and that even includes that game back at the opening of the season. He threw for just more than 100. Things were shut down on offense then. Ramsey having a solid season for the Statesman. William Penn and Central Methodist, 8-1 all time. And this goes back to the struggles last year for Central Methodist. Eagles couldn't score, and that was a good thing for their opponents because Central Methodist lost to Clark 3-0. Clark couldn't put points on the board, but still it was more than Central Methodist. Same thing for William Penn. William Penn puts only 9 points on the board, and Central Methodist put up only 6. That was last season. This time, they are in Fayette. Who's going to pick up the victory here? Let's go ahead and go back to the North Star because we don't know how much longer we're going to talk about the North Star Athletic Association. Play North Star. Well, Mayville State and Valley City State are going to play North Star here in 2023. The Vikings, 2-1 on the year. Mayville State, 0-4. And I have to say, I really did not expect that start for the Comets. 0-4 on the year. 86th meeting between these two schools on the football field. Valley City State, 65-19-1 all time. Won 48-40 in the season finale for both these teams last year. Last week, Mayville State lost to Waldorf. Valley City State defeated Dakota State 14-6. Here's another big matchup. First ever road contest for Arizona Christian in the Frontier Conference, the Firestorm. 2-1. Carroll, 3-0. Both teams won 21-20 last week. Both teams rallied to win 21-20 last week. Arizona Christian defeated MSU Northern by that 21-20 score, and Carroll came back in the fourth quarter, 21-20 over Rocky Mountain. Arizona Christian led on defense by Cameron Tibbetts, who's leading the NAIA with 12.7 tackles per game. He had 17 against the Lights from MSU Northern. And then for Carroll, it's Jack Perka coming off a record-setting 407 yards passing for the Saints. So defense against offense here. Who's going to come away with the upper hand? We'll talk about that at the very end. Rocky Mountain 2-1 on the year after that loss to Carroll. Eastern Oregon 0-3. The Mountaineers 16-10 all time in this series, but Rocky Mountain won 28-6 in 2022. When we talk about that Rocky Mountain defense, 9 sacks. That's enough to lead the Frontier Conference in that category this year. And by the way, the Battling Bears are also 10 for 10 in the red zone this year, scoring 7 touchdowns when they've been able to get inside the opponent's 20-yard line. Eastern Oregon lost to Montana Tech last week, 48-31. Staying in the Frontier, Southern Oregon 1-1. Montana Western 2-1. Southern Oregon with an 11-4 all-time series lead in this one. And they won 49-14 in 2022. But the Bulldogs are led by Michael Palandri. 284.7 passing yards a game, 9th in the NAIA, has 9 passing touchdowns. That's 8th in the NAIA. And another team that is 10 for 10 in the red zone, just like Rocky Mountain, Montana Western, 100% in the red zone. Although the Bulldogs have taken it a step further. 9 of their 10 scores have been touchdowns, just 1 field goal there. Both teams coming off a victory last week. How about one more in the Frontier Conference? Let's do that. College of Idaho, undefeated on the year, picked at the top of the Frontier in the preseason coaches poll. Well, they've done nothing to show any different than that. 3-0 on the year. Montana Tech 2-1 on the year. College of Idaho 7-3 all-time in this series with a 27-24 victory last year. Defeated Montana Western 37-35 2 weeks ago. College of Idaho big when picking up third downs. 55% on third down, good enough for 4th in the NAI. Montana Tech defeated Eastern Oregon last week. Let's move out of the Frontier and move on along back to the East Coast. St. Andrews taking on Davidson, staying in the Carolinas there. St. Andrews, the Knights haven't picked up a win yet. And not only that, Coach Curtin, he's scheduling some tough opponents and gets a Division I opponent here. It's not the first time St. Andrews has played Davidson. Second meeting all time. Davidson won 56-6 last year. Davidson defeated Marist 49-21, and St. Andrews lost last week to Bethel. Actually, that was 2 weeks ago, 77-0. Let's go ahead and stay on the East Coast here. Fort Lauderdale at Ave Maria. I mentioned a little bit earlier. Nice for Fort Lauderdale. Nice to have them back on the field and playing some games. 0-3 on the year, and they go on the road to take on the Gyrenes. This will be the first true meeting between these two schools. Ave Maria won by forfeit last year. Fort Lauderdale lost to Quincy 49-0, an NCAA Division II program. Ave Maria beat an NCAA Division III program last week, though, 27-14 on the road in Seguin, Texas. So crossing that Mississippi to pick up the win. The Gyrenes get it done and trying to pick up a win in the first ever meeting on the field between these two. They have the victory. It goes down the books as a victory with the forfeit from last season, but I'm sure they'd like to get one on the field. Here are two teams that need to pick up a win. Langston, 0-2, going on the road for the first time this year, traveling to Texas College to take on the Steers, who are 0-3. Langston, 29-12-1 all-time in this series, and the Lions have won the last 17 meetings between these two schools, 55-24 last year. Langston lost to Louisiana Christian. Tough contest there. Texas College got boat raced by OUAZ, 62-14 in that one. Someone's going to pick up a victory here. It has to happen. Back to the GPAC. Hastings, 3-1. Briar Cliff, 0-3. And the Broncos, 14-6 all-time in this matchup, won 28-9 in 2022, coming off a win over Jamestown. Back to the Sooner Athletic Conference as Arkansas Baptist on the road travel to the Panhandle out in no man's land to take on Oklahoma Panhandle. The Aggies are 1-2 on the year, trying to pick up the win there in Goodwill. Second meeting all time between the two programs. You have to go back a couple of years. 52-18 OPSU with the win in that one. Ottawa at Evangel. I mentioned that I knew that it was going to rain in a couple of these places. I've seen the forecast for Springfield because Midwest Sports Saturday was supposed to be at this contest. And Evangel playing in Springfield, as the rain or potential for rain has moved the scheduled kickoff time from 6 o'clock up to 3 o'clock Central Time, and previous obligations, as I'll be actually at another football game that day watching one of my daughters in the marching band from Missouri State. And so I'll get to watch that game up close and personal, but we won't get to go to the Evangel game to follow because it's going to wind up taking place at the same time. So, yeah, we're going to bring the We're going to bring the ponchos out. We'll be ready if it rains in Springfield, ready to watch not only football, but the marching band as well that day. But we're not going to get to make it over to Evangel for this one. Still, we'll be making it back to Evangel maybe a little bit later on this year with Midwest Sports Saturday. Let's talk about the football game now. 4-0, the Valor, and they have been dominant on defense. Have a pretty good offense as well, but they've been dominant on defense. St. Mary may have found a way to put points on the board. St. Mary scored 42 points last week in Evangel's 56-42 win, but those 42 points were 3 times as many points as the Valor had given up on defense the entire season prior to that point. So we'll see what the Braves come away in watching the film there and what Ottawa does on the road. Braves 1-3 on the year. Evangel in that tough Kessinger division still undefeated at 4-0, and we'll keep you up to speed on what's happening in Springfield on Saturday. Sterling, Southwestern, crossover game in the KCAC. The Warriors 1-3. Sterling defeated Bethany last weekend 27-20. Southwestern continues to roll 20-10, the victory over Tabor. 72nd meeting between these two programs. The Mound Builders 45-25-1, the all-time advantage, and that includes a 31-14 victory last year. North American, the Stallions 0-3 on the year. Incarnate Word, now a Division I program. I actually had a chance to broadcast an Incarnate Word game. I was calling for the other team when they played a few years back. They were a Division II program then, all the way to Division I, taking on NAIA North American in this one in San Antonio. And Incarnate Word picked up its first win of the season with a 27-20 victory over Abilene Christian. North American took on a Division I opponent last week. Didn't fare quite as well. 91-0, the Stallions took the loss last week, trying to turn around their fortunes. Still in the state of Texas, but a good little distance from Houston to San Antonio. If you've made that trip, and I have, it's a little drive to get over there. So Stallions trying to pick up a win against a Division I program. Kansas Wesleyan 2-2 on the road at Bethel. These two have been at the top of the KCAC in recent years, trying to get back up there in their respective divisions. They have a crossover game on Saturday. The Coyotes 2-2 on the year. They defeated Friends last week and put an end to the Falcons' undefeated season, 35-28. Bethel with a big victory over Avila, 42-26 last week. Bethel led by DJ Sears. He has 152.5 rushing yards per game. That is good enough for number 1 in the NAIA. He also has 10 rushing touchdowns, and that is good enough for number 1 in the NAIA. Staying with the KCAC, because the KCAC has some late games on Saturday. Tabor on the road in Wichita, and it has been mentioned, so let's go ahead and bring this up here. Homecoming week in Wichita. The Falcons are taking on the Blue Jays in this one. Tabor 0-4, lost to Southwestern last week, 20-10. Friends also with a loss last week, KWU 35-28. Friends, 451 rushing yards per game. Tops in the NAIA, and it's not even close. 24 rushing touchdowns per game, or not per game. Tops in the NAI, 24 rushing touchdowns overall. Cavante Baker, 5 for 10 passing on the season for 185 yards. Joey, that doesn't sound like that much. Well, he actually, then if you look at it, he has 18.5 yards per attempt. 18.5 yards per attempt. 3 touchdown passes. So 3 of his 5 completions this year, and he's completing at a clip of 50%. 3 of his 5 completions this year have been gone for touchdowns as well. Friends completes third downs or converts on third downs 66% of the time. That's tops in the NAI. 100% of the time on fourth down. They share that with about 9 other programs, but also tops in the NAIA. The Falcons, homecoming week. Jake is going to be celebrating on Saturday as well. Will he be celebrating when there are zeros on the clock? As Friends trying to pick up the victory over Tabor, well, the Falcons are 39-16 all time in this series, but Tabor won last year 35-16. We move back across to the Sooner Athletic Conference for just a moment. Louisiana Christian. This is a team that we've been talking about on this channel for quite a while. It's going to be a big matchup with Louisiana Christian and Texas Wesleyan when they meet just a little bit later on. But we've had our eye on the Wildcats and think that Louisiana Christian either has a chance to win the automatic bid to the playoffs from the Sooner Athletic Conference or could easily pick up an at-large bid trying to get Coach Maddox's team in. Louisiana Christian 3-0 on the year. Wayland Baptist 1-2 on the year. Louisiana Christian also 3-0 all-time in this series, won 37-13 or 37-17 last year. Devin Briscoe for the Wildcats, 129.3 rushing yards per game. That's good enough for fourth in the NAIA. One more KCAC matchup, pair of 1 and 3 teams. St. Mary lost to Evangel last week, 59-42. Bethany lost to Sterling last week, 27-20. Now, we did call Bethany's win back in week 3, said it was going to happen. Missed on it last week. Thought that they might be able to put a winning streak together. They did not. It's a one-game losing streak right now. We're going to go ahead and say we think that the Swedes get back on the winning side. Pull off the victory at home here for Coach Grossner as they are going to be taking on St. Mary. Now, hey, listen, this is a St. Mary team, by the way, that can put some points on the board against a very tough defense. Not sure that the Swedes have the same kind of defense that Evangel does. We'll find out. We think that Bethany may have enough to pick up the win right there. St. Mary 12-10 all-time in this series. And the Spires defeated the Swedes 41-0 in 2022. One more game on the docket in the NAIA schedule. This is game number 44 that we're going to talk about tonight. The number 1 team in the country, undefeated at 3-0, taking on Mount Marty. Mount Marty coming off a loss to Morningside. Well, hey, the last 70 games in the regular season of Morningside have been losses for the opponent. So Mount Marty, don't feel like you're all alone out there. Northwestern won in this one 52-8 last year, 2-0 all-time. This is the third meeting between these two programs. Mount Marty, a young program. Northwestern, not so much. Defeated Doane last week, 51-7. Connor McQuillan averaging 126.3 rushing yards per game for the season, 5 rushing touchdowns as well. Northwestern, third in the NAIA. When they get to third down, they convert 57% of the time. So let's talk about the trends here for just a moment, and we'll pick some games as we wrap up our time tonight. A little more than 40 minutes in. Thanks to everyone for watching this evening. Really appreciate that. The channel is continuing to grow, and I just can't say enough how grateful I am to all of you for watching. Those of you, and if you just picked up, if you're watching us live, thank you very much. If you're watching the replay of this, I guess you're picking this up and it's already recorded and you watched through to this point, you're a trooper. It means a lot. Picking according to the trends. Let's talk about this. Let's go back and see if we can find this matchup here. Picking according to the trends. Culver Stockton at Benedictine. Benedictine has won 33 consecutive meetings in this series. 33-2 all time. Started winning in 1975. Won 3 consecutive times. Go with the trend? Make it 34. Absolutely. The Ravens say go with the trend. We are picking Benedictine in this one over Culver Stockton. Georgetown, Reinhardt. Reinhardt is 4-0 all time in this one. Georgetown on the road. Can they put a stop to the trend? Tigers say buck the trend. Absolutely buck the trend. Georgetown, and not only Georgetown, but Georgetown big in this one. We say Georgetown by 3 scores in this one. All right, let's see where we are here. Let's pick this one. The trend. The trend in this one is that each team is going to score 21 points, the opponent's 20. Both these teams are coming off 21-20 victories last week. Both of these teams are coming off rallies in the fourth quarter to win last week. Carroll is averaging on defense, giving up 20.7 points a game. The trend is for them to give up 21 points a game. We're going to say go with the trend. Carroll gives up 21 points, but they score 24. First meeting in these two teams' history, and we're picking 24-21 Carroll over Arizona Christian. Graceland, 3-1. Baker, 2-1. Baker has won 14 consecutive games in this series. I was wrong last week about Graceland bucking the trend against Benedictine. I don't think I'm going to be wrong this week. Graceland bucks the trend right there. Graceland picks up the win over Baker on the road. Too much. Cade Ross to Gerald Monroe. Ross to Monroe shut down just one touchdown connection last week. I don't think it stays as a single touchdown connection this week. All right. Let's see here. Let's find another one. Avila, McPherson. Avila 1-3. McPherson 3-1. Avila is 4-0 all time in this series. But McPherson is led by Tristan Szabo. He's passing for 294 yards per game. Avila is giving up 465 yards per game. That is 88th out of 94 teams competing in the NAIA this season. McPherson bucked the trend. The series goes to 4-1. McPherson's going to win this one, and the Bulldogs will win it by 2 scores. Roosevelt, Indiana Wesleyan. The trend on this one is that Indiana Wesleyan has to wait to the end of the game to win, stopping a 2-point conversion to seal a victory. Roosevelt is a very tough team coming in. The trend is that Indiana Wesleyan is going to have a tough time and barely pull it out in the end. The Wildcats buck the trend on this one. Stokes and Company by 10 points at least. Double-figure win for the Wildcats in this one. All right, let's see here. Midland, Morningside. Midland 3-1, and if you watched this last year on Midwest Sportsnet, we felt like Midland had a really good chance to make it to the playoffs. Just came down to a tough loss in the next to the last game of the season, that penultimate game when they took on Northwestern. And of course, we know what happened from Northwestern. The Red Raiders went on to win the national championship. Midland still with an opportunity to play for a playoff berth this season. 4 more playoff berths on the line. 20 teams are going to be in the NAIA playoff field this year. Midland 3-1, just a 1-point loss last week, but Morningside has won 22 of 24 all time. Morningside has also won 70 consecutive regular season games. The trend goes to Morningside. Go with the trend in this one. Mustangs win over the Warriors, and they're going to do it at home in Sioux City in what we think could be a wet and rainy Sioux City. Let's do one more. How about one more if I can find one here? There we go. One more. Dickinson State, 2-1 this year. Waldorf, 3-1. We enjoyed talking about Jatovier Hill last week. He's continuing to roll, carrying the ball well for the Warriors. Had 5 touchdown carries last week alone, tying a 56-year-old record for the program. But Dickinson State is 9-1 all-time in this matchup. Go with the trend. Dickinson State gives a parting love gift from the North Star Conference to Waldorf on their way out. Go with the trend. Blue Hawks win in this one. And that is a look at the NAIA schedule for Week 4. Take a look all the way down through there. We've talked about 44 games this evening. You guys have been along for the ride, so I really appreciate that. Hey, listen, tell a friend about the channel too. We enjoy talking about NAIA football, NAIA volleyball, Division II football, Division II volleyball, and that's just stuff in the fall. We talk about a lot more throughout the entire 12 months. We are your home for small college sports. Division II, NAIA, we talk about small college sports and more throughout the Midwest and beyond. Please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And again, we're growing. We're just about to the point where we can make another announcement here. And we think it's going to be a big one, something that will be able to help us. But we do need to continue having you watch the channel as well and get those views up. So thank you again for watching. Dale, Jake, Dave, and the rest who are watching tonight. God bless you all. Have a good weekend. I know it's going to be wet for a lot of you. It's probably going to be wet. I'll be at a game. You're going to be at a game. Wherever you are, stay safe, though. Enjoy it. Be wise. Be safe. And have a lot of fun. And, last programming note. We do our top 5 performances on Sunday each week at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. That may vary just a little bit this Sunday, but we will keep up with the programming note there. We'll let you know when we are going to go on with our top 5 performances from this weekend. We may have to push back the start time to 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central on Sunday. It may even be pushed into Monday. We'll see. We'll keep you posted on that. I know that everyone who's watching has somebody they'd like to see in that top 5 performance list. Anyway, thanks again for watching, though. Have a great, fun week. Watch some football. Be safe. Be wise. God bless you all, and have a very good night.